Okay,
Okay.
we're in the final stretch for Global Skills Day. 125 speakers, 4 tracks, 26 countries represented,
My goodness.
and now it comes down to us. So it's more wonderful to have all of you here. We may not have John Fallon join us because it's 1 a.m. London time, and I completely understand the challenges of time zones. But it's wonderful to have the three of you here because each of you has such a unique perspective. I want to introduce you briefly, and then I want to just dive right in and get a number of your perceptions. So I can't think of a better team to deconstruct some of the major themes of the day. So I'm just going to go left to right from my screen. So Carmen, Twillie, Ambar, president of Oberlin College, one of my favorite places on the planet to visit, one of the most iconic and amazing campuses. Not that I have enough college to stuff into a thimble, so I have no alma mater to remember fondly myself. So I'll just adopt Oberlin because that's where our son Christian that did had a marvelous education. Karl Mehta is the CEO of Edcast, longtime collaborator and friend, and breathtaking view of range of issues related to the unbundling of learning around the world. And then Jamie Merisotis, CEO of Lumina, and really one of the champions for human-centric work and learning, and has been a tremendous supporter of a lot of the big shift in education, especially in higher education. So I want to just start right away and get your insights. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch any of our sessions today, but I want to get your perceptions. One of the continuing themes, obviously, coming out of this, we positioned Global Skills Day. Initially, I was saying at the opening remarks as talking about a post-pandemic co-creation of a future of work and learning. And we know that many places around the world are not post-pandemic. They're still dealing with it.
Yeah.
But from each of your perspectives, and I'm going to start with Carmen, what have been one of the 2 or 3 big shifts that you have seen? And obviously you're anchored in education with a liberal arts college, but you can span the world of work if you want as well. But what are the 2 or 3 big shifts that you've seen in the pandemic era and that you believe are going to be lasting coming out of this period?
So, it's interesting as we are coming out of it, and at Oberlin, we had all of our students on campus in this configuration of a 3-term. I think one of the biggest shifts is the definition of what transformation is, what the transformative experience is. And so it's not just the classroom or engagement with an incredible faculty member. It's also about students' expectation that the environment itself will nurture and support their own creative innovation, and that we will be creating that environment by the types of people that we bring on campus, the colleagues that they have, and that they're asking for a different level of transformation in their own experience than they felt beforehand. I think the other piece that's changed is that we certainly knew what we lost sort of in the pandemic. And so students are asking us to bring with them the things that they gained from that experience. So they were at a distance sometimes. They want to connect with people and places and thought leaders anytime, any place that they want to. And they want the pace of that to be quicker and for us to be moving in more thoughtful ways. And so one of the things that we've discovered is that, things that we thought would take 2 and 3 years to do, we had to do it in 2 weeks. Right. And so we can be thoughtful and deliberative and have pace. And I think students are expecting that. And I think that will change us for forever.
No, absolutely, Carmen. And I think I've talked with educators at a variety of institutions around the world. And one of the themes I hear, I think, just echoing what you're saying, is that the lived experience of those learners needs to be immediately baked into the learning process immediately. Tony O'Driscoll, who's a friend of mine who teaches at Duke Fuqua, he had basically his classroom took over the class and said, the syllabus you have in the pandemic era, that's not what we want to learn. Yeah. So we want you to rewrite it now and go find a whole bunch of people to help us to be able to deal with this and be ready to have all those people doing that next week.
Yeah, it's actually, I've been using a phrase for that, this sort of on-demand generation, right? I want it any place, anytime, any way that I expect it to be delivered, and I want thought leaders that can help me evaluate my own thinking about it. I'm not expecting you to be a conveyor of knowledge, although I appreciate that. I'm part of the conveying of that knowledge as well, right? Yeah. And I want to be a part of the curation.
Yeah, I was talking with Pit Surf, one of the fathers of the internet earlier today, and he was saying, yeah, young people, I mean, they see something, and if somebody already answered the question, then they listen to that you watch a YouTube video, and if somebody hasn't answered, they go answer it themselves, and they're the YouTube creators.
Yes, that's
now,
exactly
Jamie,
right.
You with Lumina, which is, I've done such a tremendous job of supporting so many different higher education institutions, and you were a marvelous supporter of a conference that my wife Heidi and I helped to co-produce back in 2010 on the future of higher education. I mean, you were just tremendously visionary in this arena. What are some of the themes that you're seeing in this big shift? Because you deal with so many different educational institutions.
Yeah, I want to plus one President Ambar's innovating at the speed of a virus observation, because I think that none of us could have predicted that so many institutions could do that. At least I'll speak for myself and say I was pleasantly surprised to see that speed of innovation, which I think is good. Maybe a couple of other things that I think are really important, both in the learning and workspace. One is that I think in the US, the UK, countries like South Africa, places that I know well, the growing awareness about the fact that women and Black, Indigenous, and people of color and others bore the brunt, both from an educational and from a work perspective, of this virus, I think is a sort of long-term outcome. It's not as if we didn't know that before the virus, but I think a growing number of people now recognize it and understand it. We saw this with the frontline workers. We saw this with the people who didn't have access to technology in K-12 or higher ed, in schooling. So I think that's a big learning. Another is a trend, again, that was accelerated because of COVID, which is both worker and learner agency, I think, have increased. We saw this with worker agency with the gig economy, right? And we saw this in learner agency, again, before COVID, with things like homeschooling or self-directed learning in higher ed. Well, now we have this pandemic come along and everybody's doing wholly online and then hybrid, and now some sort of, we've got this continuum of things that we're talking about now. So I think that agency of the workers and learners has really increased. And then maybe one prediction, Gary, a short-term prediction about one of the things that we've learned. And my prediction, I'm going to hold myself till the end of 2021 for the prediction, which is that 2021 could be, we may look back on this at the conference next year and call 2021 the high water mark for federal funding, the 100-year flood for federal funding. I think it is possible. We already saw a big chunk of money in the Recovery Act, but we may see more significant money coming down the pike if the Democrats decide to break the filibuster and some other things, with an incredible amount of money. I'm speaking here in the US context, in ways that I am both excited about, but also concerned about. I'm excited because I think it's overdue, but I'm concerned because I want to make sure that it's used to leverage the change that we need to improve equity and to change the outcomes of the system to serve more people better.
Well, so I want to come back to this in a little bit, because I was going to ask you to, you're talking about sort of reaching sort of peak investment potentially from a public standpoint in the US. I'm going to ask you a little later on if you think we've also sort of hit peak college based at, a lot of the macro trends that we're experiencing, but we'll come back to that in a little bit. Karl, now here we are, we're talking about, in many cases, traditional institutions that are trying to adapt. And then along come these upstarts, these unbundlers like Edcast, which take a whole bunch of learning that used to be sort of embedded in physical space, and now, have basically been unbundled and placed onto platforms like Edcast. So what have you seen in the shift with not just obviously the sort of that adult launchpad college age learner, but and learners beyond? What are some of the big changes that you've seen just in the past year?
Sure. Thanks, Gary. And thank you for inviting an amazing conference and great insights, President Ambar and Jamie. So good to meet you all. Well, I mean, there's three big trends that we've seen. Number one, the pandemic accelerated digital transformation, what we would have otherwise seen in 5 years, 10 years in the enterprise. And I'm speaking purely from an enterprise world where we operate in with the global 2000 companies. We have seen that in 1 year. So if there is a one silver lining in a lot of bad news with the pandemic, all the death and destruction, that's one positive silver lining. It's also brought central, it has made employees at the center on the CEO agenda. So typically in the organizations, it would always be like customer first and then employees were second. I think it has flipped the switch because given that how much disruption it has caused with remote work and employees and all the health and wellness and everything, suddenly you see that all the CEOs or executive C-suite is now putting employees at the center, and that's the employee first mindset has come in. They've also recognized three big areas of gaps. Number one is that the whole water cooler experience and peer-to-peer learning that would happen otherwise in a physical environment, that has all disappeared. So that needs to happen in a digital environment, in a mobile first, in an AI first, where you can serendipity can be programmed with AI and you can connect with people whom you don't know, but they have an expertise in that area and you are able to learn from them. That micro learning that happens in the water cooler, all that, the technology existed over the last several years, but the adoption was very slow in the organizations because of, typically technology adoption takes a long time. People resist technology, but now we're saying in the past 12 or 18 months, that barrier of technology adoption has disappeared because everybody wants to replicate that water cooler experience. So that lifelong learning, peer-to-peer learning has accelerated. The second big trend is the upskilling has become fundamental because you're identifying that when people are working remotely, they are not having that access to skills that you would otherwise have complementary skills people sitting in the same conference room and then getting work done. Now everybody's remote and you need to understand who has what skills. So the ability to have a common taxonomy and an ontology around skills across organizations, across what your credentials are, what certificates and badges and learning and courses that you've taken, that all needs to align with what the business or what the organization and the workplace needs. And so that whole skilling, upskilling, reskilling, and taxonomy ontology has become a center place now. It's really the hardest area. The third trend is about career pathing. So in the past, before the pandemic, when we needed a skill in an organization, we would just go out and hire people from outside. Now what has happened is that you are also seeing that so many people are leaving your organizations too because they are not able to adapt to different ways of working, different skills. So it is putting a lot of pressure on the CEOs and the C-suite to provide a career pathing to their internal employees so that you are able to upskill them, reskill them, because you can't have these two doors in your organization. On one door, you are letting go people, which is a bad news, and whatever, due to economy or whatever your internal changes. On the other side, you are hiring people. The people who are moving out of your organization and getting laid off is a really bad thing to see. So why can't organizations provide enough capability internally to their employees to upskill, reskill, and it always costs 1/3 to reskill a person than to hire somebody from outside. So those are the three things in summary are big mega trends that we are seeing as a big shift.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I think you've given it a great sense of what some of the demands on the employer side are. Now, I personally, I don't want to be the word police, but I personally don't use words, as you know, Karl, like upskilling and reskilling, because those kind of sound like the industrial era processes we're trying to leave behind. But what I would definitely agree is that there's more, suddenly the scales have fallen off the eyes of so many corporate decision makers. Oh, we need to train people, so we don't just have to lay them off. You would have thought that the insights of paying it forward would have occurred to them a long time ago. But you brought up, I think, an important point, Karl, and I'd like first Jamie and then Carmen to riff on this. If the organization starts to pick up more of that slack of what you need to do to train people, what then is the role of higher education? I mean, how do you see what those institutions need to become to be able to help prepare, especially that sort of young adult launchpad period, but as colleges expand the aperture of who their customer is and potentially go beyond just that young adult? What is that college of the future, and what is its relationship with the employer? There was somebody who was when I was talking to Arnie Duncan, the former Secretary of Education earlier today, there was a questioner who asked the question, are corporations basically just going to become the specifiers, and colleges are going to basically just be training all those, the workforce of tomorrow, and that's it? That's all that their role will be? Or is there a different vision for what a college needs to become? Jamie, why don't you start that off, and maybe Carmen, you can.
I highly doubt that last point, by the way. I think what we're talking about, and this gets to Karl's point about the diversity of the ecosystem right now when it comes to credentials. What we're seeing is an expansion of the number and type of credentials out there, the number of credential issuers, and the number of employers that are accepting more diverse credentials. So colleges and universities have a role to play in that marketplace. The question is, are they going to seize the opportunity and adapt to that changing marketplace? So that's one big question. I'm an optimist. I think they will, or I think many will, and I think those that don't are going to be in the adapt or die category. So I'm optimistic about that. What I do know, Gary, is that the demand for talent is rising, and we've got to prepare people. This idea that people are already prepared for the human work that we have to do, I think is wrong. I think that, in fact, we need people who have credentials to not only prepare them for the jobs of today, but for what I think is going to be this virtuous cycle of learning and earning and serving others that I think is going to be the paradigm for human work going forward. And if that's the case, that's the point of my new book, but if that's the case, then I think that we have to look at the colleges and universities as one element of a large ecosystem that is going to have to prepare people not only for jobs, but for our civic well-being, for our social well-being, for our shared prosperity. And that's going to be an important part of what the colleges and universities will have to do. It's an important part of what they think they do now, but I think they're going to have to show us the money, right? I think they're going to have to demonstrate that they're preparing the citizens, the leaders, the people who are actually contributing to our shared well-being going forward. So I think the colleges and universities will have a big role, but those that don't adapt to this changing environment, I think will face a terrible consequence.
I think that colleges and universities are already making those changes, right? Maybe not as fast as Jamie wants us to, but we are moving in that direction. And I agree that if we don't adapt, we will not be relevant. But the notion of how we connect our students to work has already made that shift on college campuses, I think, in a large way. I think that the time has collapsed for colleges, right? So the notion of time to credential, the notion of the arc of the educational experience is not as limited as it used to be. So even in my own world, which is a very traditional liberal arts college, what our alumni expect from us now is different than what they expected from us 20 years ago. They still want to connect with us and learn and grow with the institution and have us have credentials that can help them do that. So I think we are getting there. I think that we certainly don't view ourselves as the only purveyors of expertise. And so we're making the types of partnerships that I think institutions have to make, whether they're corporate or nonprofit organizations. And I think that our students themselves are saying that we want to be prepared in a holistic way for a world that is nothing but complexity, right? So it used to be a world where the disciplines were kind of separated, people were sort of tracked in these ways. And now what students are saying is that we want you to prepare us for the complexity. And so it's shifted from this notion of careers, although that's important. It's around the issues that they care about, and they want us to prepare them for that. So, at Oberlin, our students, yes, they talk about being a lawyer or a doctor or whatever it is, but they say, I'm interested in climate change. I'm interested in thinking about income inequality. I'm interested in thinking about mass incarceration. Give me the tools to deal with that complexity. Give me all the disciplinary work that I need, connect me to experts. And then I think the major shift that's been happening is I want to apply that learning now. I don't want to wait till I get out. I want to have experiential opportunities, whether they're internships, undergraduate research, study abroad, whatever it is. So for us, that's out of our Center for Engaged Liberal Arts. No longer this only in the classroom, only with the sage on the stage. I want to apply it now with all of those pieces at my disposal, because I know that I'm going to meet a world that I want to engage with and that I want to change. And I want to be ready for it. And that complexity and rigor is, I think, what we can provide that maybe we haven't done in the fulsome way before, but I think we're ready for the change. And I think our students are demanding it.
Well, you pointed out, Carmen, I think what's true for, I think, a lot of educational institutions, not just colleges in the United States, but around the world, is we typically, historically, have treated these almost as silos of learning. And getting somebody to do some kind of cross-disciplinary studies. Our nephew Brian, he was at NYU and was getting an acting degree, but became fascinated by virtual reality and literally could not make the shift. Like, he couldn't just suddenly have that intersection of learning added to his learning program. And that's a fail for everybody. It's a fail for the institution. It's a fail for the individual. But, Karl, what you're coming at from the opposite end is you've already got so in an existing educational institution, you've got all these silos of the different parts of the institution and the programs within them. Karl, you come at it from the other angle. You've got all of this content that then can be reassembled dynamically into learning paths, and that is breaking aside apart the silos in the organizations themselves, correct? I mean, that it's giving people the ability to suddenly learn what they need to learn as they need to learn it.
Yeah, and it's going back to President Ambar's comment about the on-demand. So it's really where the world is going, is that it's the empowerment. The learners are empowered, as you were saying, Gary, about Vincent, about when people want to learn, they want to learn the skills, the content, the format, the time, the place. Everything is as per them, not as per the provider. Okay? So I, as a learner, want everything exactly the way I want to. Who do I want to learn from? Which credential I want? Where? How? Format? Timeline? Size? Space? Whatever. So what we've done and what we are seeing, there's enormous consumption. Before Edcast, we used to benchmark the data about the learner index inside organizations. It used to be 5%, less than 5%. So less than 5% of the people would engage in any kind of learning or achieving credentials, micro credentials, whatever it could be. Now, what we've seen in the past 5 years with the availability of an on-demand type platform that democratizes the access to knowledge and learning, we're seeing on an average about 35% as an MAU, like a social media type index, monthly active users. But in some organizations, we have as high as 80%, which is unbelievable. And this has happened, this massive shift has happened from 5% to 80%. So it just shows that, when you give people the right tools and the right content for them to make their own decision and to do their own learning and skilling at their own time and pace, people are grabbing it, right? They want to do it. There is a curiosity that exists in everyone. I think everybody wants to have a lifelong learning as it's a trait or a desire that exists, but we were seeing only some people were lifelong learners and vast majority of the people were not. But I think over the last 5 years, with the availability of these tools, we are seeing that as you give access to people, you see 80% of the people becomes lifelong learners.
So Karl, I agree that it creates a tremendous amount of opportunity to do that. I guess the one thing I'd push back on is there's no question if organizations do it right and encourage, make the space for people to learn, it can go tremendously well. One of our pre-conference interviews that we pushed out was I had a conversation with Adelson Borges of Carrefour, which is a 330,000 person organization, and they have just a stunning amount of consumption of the learning materials because they've made the space for it. But the truth is, there's still so many learners that don't think of themselves as lifelong learners, don't have that agency. And so what ends up happening when you start to unbundle these resources, at least on a college campus or in a school or in a cohort, you've got the context, hopefully, that's going to help you to be able to run to completion in your learning experience. And I know that's not true for all colleges. I know there's, completion rates are, we still need to improve. That's something Arnie Duncan was talking about. But for both Carmen and Jamie, is that one of the things we need to take away from that more traditional experience, which is that there's this sort of fabric of support around the learner to help them to be able to continue to run to completion and develop that agency? Because my worry, Karl, in the unbundled world is my continuous phrase is no human left behind. And the problem is that you just get these big yawning spaces where people can fall through the cracks because they're not part of a learning class or cohort, or they don't have in-person teachers that are watching them and making sure that they stay engaged.
Well, I think that what we all saw from the pandemic, and at Oberlin, although we had all of our students on campus in this year, in March, remember, everyone sort of went home and we had this period of time where all of our students were remote. And the inequity was very clear, right? As everyone went home. And some of those inequities we get a chance to eliminate by bringing them in this cohort model all together on campus, or at least to mitigate for them, right? In the ways that we provide the experience. And so you saw that as students were, challenges getting online. I'm taking care of my family and my sibling. I can't engage in the classroom experience the same way the student who has their own private room and their ability to engage in a very different way. So I think you're right, Gary, that some of this is about the collaborative, collective, communal experience. We know that there is value in that, and that there are some things that we lost by not being on campus together. It's not to say that we should be only exclusively residential colleges and that that's the only way to do this. And the value in our system is the diversity in it, right? And the diversity in it because it creates access and opportunity. And for those of us who are in this game because we believe that higher education and access to a transformed society, we like the diversity in that system. But it is true that by having this sort of cohort collection, you catch more people. And we want to, I agree with you, Gary, no person left behind. That's Lumina's sort of goal, right? To have a certain number of people to have their college degree or some credential that moves them by, what is it, 2025? I don't know. I don't
2025,
remember.
that's right. Well done, thank you.
Right. So we certainly don't want anyone left behind. And this pandemic revealed what happens when you don't have that collective experience. I think it also revealed for the sort of C-suite group, the free-flowing collaborative opportunity to engage in the exchange of ideas is where the innovative space is. And there are some things about this platform that we're on right now that are wonderful, that allow you to do some wonderful transactional things and some creative things. It sometimes limits the free-flowing exchange of innovation and collaborative ideas. And something about this time that we spent in the pandemic has reminded us that we need that. And I don't want us to lose that, even as we take all the value that we can out of what happened in this pandemic in terms of helping us understand how technology can advance what we need to do in higher education and all up and down the sort of education industry.
Yeah, I just want to add to.
But I'm sorry, I want you to respond there, but also please add to that. I asked earlier, I said I was going to come back to you about, have we reached peak college? Because at least in the United States, you're seeing a lot of this sort of flattening of graduating high school rates and that sort of thing in different geographies. And you also see this, continual separation of how expensive that in-person college experience is. So I'd love you to address that as well.
Yeah, let me say first, I'm pro Carmen and pro Karl. I think there's these are not two sides of a coin is the point, right? These are complementary, overlapping, intersecting strategies, I think, that are in service to a bigger goal, which is increasing the number and quality of talented individuals we have in our society. I think it's really important to think of it in that way. So these are different approaches towards getting towards that common objective of a more talented society, a more equitable society, a society that's actually ultimately increasing prosperity for all of us, not just for some. Okay, so if that's the case, then the question is, how do we actually make sure that both of these things work together? Well, Karl made the point, I want to underscore this, that a key to this is the credentials, right? So the pushback that I've had to make here, particularly in the last year, is this idea that the debate shouldn't be about skills, or shouldn't be about degrees, it should be about skills. It's a false dichotomy, right? The point here is that the skills actually have to be demonstrated with something, a degree, a certificate, a certification, a license, a badge, whatever it is. Because from an employer and an individual perspective, unless you can show what you know, it's a problem in the labor market. And it's a problem in terms of this lifelong changing cycle of work that I think we're going through. So the question is, and Gary, you and I were talking about this in 2010 in Sausalito with a couple dozen other people about this idea of what happens when the system gets unbundled. How is this rebundling going to take place? And the answer is, it was the slowest moving train wreck ever, right? And now that we're in the middle of this, we recognize that the rebundlers, the Karls of the world, have one piece of the equation, but they don't have the whole thing, right? They have one strategy that's really important. And if it's been a long day for people, but if there's just one data point, one data point I can use to illustrate the point and to answer your second question, it is the labor market data from March, right? So March was one of the biggest years we had, or biggest months we've had so far in terms of new job creation. 916,000 new jobs created in the US economy in March. Of the 916,000 new jobs, 7,000 went to people with high school credential or less. All the rest went to people with some form of post-high school credential. So that tells you that employers are voting with their feet. They need to see the credential. Doesn't have to be a degree from a great school like Oberlin. It can be from lots of different places. But the point is that we need the credential to demonstrate that the Oberlins and the Edcasts are actually preparing people for this work that's going to matter going forward.
I just want to point out, Jamie, at that event, it's called Degree, for those of you who are interested, dgrae.org. And the videos are still up there. And one of the videos you'll see is Dale Doherty, who's the founder of the Maker Movement, presaging Karl's company. Because what he said is, after he heard a lot of these dynamics that these educators were talking about, and incidentally, my favorite tweet, this is when Twitter was very young, my favorite tweet from the conference was, the innovators are pitching and the educators are bitching. It was that there was all these new ideas that were coming out, but the educators saying, "Oh no, we're innovating. Leave us alone. Don't look over here, Silicon Valley." And then along comes an Edcast, and what Dale said was, "Hey, wait a minute. We're talking about this unbundling thing that John Hagel talks about. Why wouldn't we have Open Table, which allows me to find any available restaurant seat? Why wouldn't I have Open Course, Open Classroom, where I could find any course that I wanted and be able to sample it and do that with a cohort of friends if I wanted to?" And so that was one of the things I thought that was fascinating. Was you're right about the slow moving train wreck. We've known about these things for a long time. It's taken this pedal to the metal of a pandemic to get so many to say, well, wait a minute, this has been possible. Now it's required. So Karl, how do you think about that sort of shift and especially what Jamie and Carmen are talking about? I mean, how do you think all of that then is going to map itself out? Take us a little farther down the road, and do you think this is going to just build greater connective tissue with existing educational institutions?
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with Jamie that, and obviously with President Ambar, that, everyone's got a role to play. We as an aggregator, curator, and using AI and machine learning to bring a large scale, mass scale platforms. But then there are institutions that has some of the credibility and the credentials and expertise that needs to get combined. So I think in the end, the learners and the individuals are the winners in this, because the more and more of all of us as a provider, we've done a bad job over the past 10, 20 years in collaborating as an ecosystem. And that's where, Gary, your comment is like, I've lived through it. I've lost a lot of hair in just that thing about pitching as an innovator and getting bitched out by educational institutions. In the 1.0 version of Edcast, we used to pitch this platform to colleges and universities. There were no buyers. And then we had to pivot and go and sell to the enterprise, and we got great success. But I think we're coming back to the full circle. We are getting a lot of interest now from the traditional colleges and universities, and they're saying, hey, we want your users in the enterprise, and we want your platform, but we have all the content and the instructors and the experts who can come in, and we have the credential. And Jamie is absolutely right that the workplace needs credentials, whether it's micro credential or macro credential, it doesn't matter. So all of these is just coming together. The technology is just helping us to connect with API first and plugging it in, and this unbundling is really helpful. That whole trend that you've been speaking about since the very beginning, the whole unbundling of this educational ecosystem, that is finally happening, right? Just in the last couple of years. We all saw this coming, and it's now happening. So I think we're just going to see more and more collaboration, better access to education, and I think what the noble cause that we're all working on, that Jamie mentioned, is to bring more talented and skilled people in the society. That's the key indicator of progress of the society. we're all working towards the exact same goal, and it's finally happening.
Yes, but each of you, and I know we're talking about, it's a lot of the positive aspects of this. What we're talking about is a significant amount of change in more than anything of mindset. And I'd love to hear each of you sort of riff on this, because I mean, we're talking about a lot of the positive examples that we can give, but the truth is, you're talking about changing the mindset of the hirer. And I think of it basically is trying to balance the table. So we're saying, let's get more credentialed opportunities for people. That raises the perception of the capacity, the capability of the humans. But we've also got to lower the risk profile for that hirer, because the reason they were requiring that 4, 6, or 8 year degree before was risk reduction. If you as I said earlier, if you knew, you guaranteed that the next person to walk in your door was the perfect person to hire, you'd hire them. But instead, we put all this layer after layer within organizations. We had a whole track on hacking HR throughout this conference that is basically a risk reduction machine. It's essentially trying to say, I'm going to keep on filtering and filtering and filtering that pipeline until I guarantee that this is going to be a successful person. And you couldn't even guarantee that. So I think what we're seeing is a change in mindset in the hirer. But it's also got to be a change in mindset within academic institutions, right? Because that former tenured professor who has been teaching Sanskrit for the past 30 years in exactly the same way now may no longer be teaching something quite as relevant. They've got to be, I use the example of the media business. I'm a recovering journalist, and I wrote a piece called Unbundling Media years ago that said, wow, this is kind of similar to what we're going through in the learning experience. And you're seeing the same kind of dynamics with that educator, the ones that are adaptive, the ones that are building their own individual brands, the ones that are able to continually meet the needs of what the customer is looking for, the ones that are the most successful. But you're talking about a mindset shift for those educators. So I'd love to hear each of you riff. I mean, how do you get that? Like, you've got to change the mindset of a hirer, you got to change the mindset of the educator, and you also have to change the mindset of the learner so that they can continually have the agency to be able to take advantage of these opportunities.
It's not easy sitting in this role as a college president about all the different mindsets that have to be changed. I will say that one of the things that I think the pandemic did, but we were marching towards this anyway, honestly. I mean, if you think about the types of things that colleges and universities have been dealing with, right? So we all know the demographic cliff is coming, at least for those of us who have been focused on traditional age college students. Parents and families have been asking us for quite some time to demonstrate our value in different ways, questioning the liberal arts colleges in my world, questioning our value, asking us to measure that value in ways that we haven't quite been prepared to, asking us to respond to unlikely competitors. In the past, it would be places like Edcast, but other things. So I think we've been marching towards this, actually. And so some of our ability to change the various constituencies' minds is a clarity of the issue before us. And so, one of the things that I think college presidents have to do a lot is to be the radical purveyor of the truth of what we're facing, right? And so I do think that has seated itself in a lot of universities and colleges. The radical truth is that we have a model that doesn't quite work anymore. And even for selective institutions like Oberlin, with the endowment that we have, so we're not on the edge, but I talk about all the time that this is about the sustainability for years and years to come. And if that's our goal, to deliver on this academic experience and sustainability for years and years to come, then we know we have to change. We really do. And so the question is, can we do it in the pace that we need to? And I think the pandemic has helped us see that we can keep a different pace. So I think that the future is bright in the sense that there's a radical understanding of what the truth is, that the landscape has changed, shifted under our feet, no more placid waters. It's only rapids from here on out. And so the question that we're doing at a place like Oberlin is not questioning that they're rapids, just making sure, do I have the right ore? Do we have the right raft? Do we have the right people on it? Because we know that radical pace of change is upon us. And so I'm more optimistic because I know that we see it in a way that maybe we didn't see it even 18 months ago.
I think the marketplace is becoming more competitive, and so I do expect in the next few years that you will see enrollments in higher education move back up from the lows that we saw in the last couple of years because of demographics and the pandemic. However, the market is going to increasingly demand higher and higher value from those institutions. And I think that's the critical point here is there are going to be winners and losers. Again, to Carmen's point, we were talking about this beforehand, but I think the agency is increasingly shifting towards the learners and the workers in ways that is going to have an impact on these providers that are not willing to move. I am not sure that the brand is going to be as important 10 years from now as it is now. It's going to be show me what you know and what you can do. And, oh, that's from Oberlin. That's a plus for me. But the first question is going to be show me what you know and can do. And then the second order is going to be Oberlin. Right now, it's reversed, in my opinion, right? Right now, it is that it's a proxy. You've got a degree from Oberlin. That's good, or it has been for the last 50 years, Carmen. And then, I think this, and that. I think this is going to be turned on its head. But I think that the providers are increasingly going to be required to show that their graduates know and can do certain things, or the marketplace is going to shift towards those that can do that.
And I think families are already asking us that, Gary. So when I'm in admissions events, and I'm there quite often, families are asking us already, what does my life after Oberlin look like? Like, it's about the experience that's on campus, but what does my life after Oberlin look like? So many of our initiatives around launching students from college more effectively has been about demonstrating what you know as you exit Oberlin. And so, we did this during the pandemic. We did this junior practicum where we had our juniors who were off campus. They did a series of about 50 workshops while they were off campus, and then did these virtual internships. So I was on a session with students who did an internship with folks in Ghana because they were trying to get their knowledge base of applied learning, even though they weren't on campus. And so we were trying to set them up for that launch after Oberlin because we know that's going to be critical. So families are already asking us for that. And I think that we are better positioned than we were even 18 months ago, but certainly 5 years ago, to demonstrate, yes, it's Oberlin. You're right, Jamie, that is a big, huge plus, but we also can demonstrate what we know too. And that's it's important for employers to be able to see that, even as students think about what they bring to the table that they want their employers to be different about and change, right? They're asking the employer to be the same thing they're asking us to do, about accept their knowledge and innovation and creativity, and that they are conveyors of knowledge too. They're also saying that to their employers, that I'm not just here to be your sort of pawn. I have something to deliver that's different than you may want. That's changing for employers just like it's changing for higher ed.
And that's pretty mind-blowing for an awful lot of hirers, I got to tell you. So our time together is short. We've only got a few more minutes, and we're going to enter into lightning round. I want to address some of the questions that people have asked. So I'm going to just start running through these. So Karl, I think the next question is for you. So Michael Fung, who actually he's the leader of Skills Future Singapore, and I had him late at night, his time in a session earlier today, and now he's back online and he's asking. So you talked about this sort of digital water cooler kind of experience. How do you think about that? We're making this shift to what people keep on using the label I hate, which is hybrid, but basically you've got these things that we know are really good about people being in person and together, and you've got these things that are not so good about being digital and removed. Are there ways that you're seeing that organizations are building in some of that technology or some of that opportunity to be able to have some of that dynamic interaction and some of that collaboration that makes up for the fact that we're not always in person and sparking off of each other?
Yeah, no, great question. And this whole first degree of separation, second degree of separation, which when you're in a physical building, you run into people in organizations in a hallway conversation or water cooler, that has kind of disappeared in the digital first world. But with AI and machine learning, we have progressed to a level with the skills architecture and skills taxonomy. We are able to track down people with with their various skills and then match them with people who are looking for that skills, so that peer-to-peer interaction can be surfaced. And let's say if you're a very simple thing, like if you're watching a video about a particular skill or a lecture or a course, and we may be able to show you other people who have expertise in it within your organization, or people who have completed it, so that you can dynamically have some conversation. Or if you write a comment, then somebody else, like that water cooler conversation, somebody else would know about it who is most likely to write a comment, and then you can spark off that conversation, that serendipity. So I mean, it's all work in progress, but AI and machine learning has progressed to the level, as long as you have the right skills taxonomy, architecture, people's skills credentials, and things like that.
And if listeners are interested in what Karl is talking about and sort of this connective tissue inside the organization, one of the pre-conference interviews that I did was with Kelly Stephen Weiss, who's the founder of Hitchworks. And she wrote a book called The Inside Gig, which talks about exactly how you build more and more of that connective tissue inside the organization. Again, I'm going to ask you each to keep your answers as short as you can so we can get you a couple more questions. Jamie, so Bob G is asking, well, what about the cost of a college education? And we've got some of this, this challenge of increasing costs, and sure, hopefully many educators have gotten the memo that they need to provide more value, but you still have this skyrocketing cost that is, at least for a lot of the in-person colleges, has been increasingly a challenge for many learners.
Absolutely right. And so, in the late 80s, I started writing about the coming crisis in student debt, and I was wrong for 25 years until I was finally right. And in the 90s, I started writing about the coming crisis and the price of college, and I've been wrong for 25 years, but I think I'm getting closer to being right on that one now. I think there's a tipping point, and I do think the tipping point is getting closer here, where people simply aren't going to be willing to pay these above inflation tuition increase rates for much longer. It's now been almost 4 decades of above inflation tuition increases. I think that's not sustainable. Places like Purdue, 10 years in a row now, tuition freeze. They've improved the quality of the outcomes, in my opinion, the accomplishments of what they're producing. So they've been able to literally deliver a better product at a lower price to consumers. I think that's something that is coming. I do think there's a tipping point coming, and I think that those that miss that tipping point are going to pay a very big price, and even in the elite tier, I think they're going to suffer some market share loss.
All right, so Mark Prensky, who incidentally is an Oberlin alum, Carmen, is a frequent writer about the big shift in education. He's basically challenging this whole thing around credentials. And he's saying, well, it's really kind of more experience. I mean, we're really thinking about it. People prove that they have the certain skills or certain capacities based on what they've been able to demonstrate. And a credential is actually, that's one context for proving that somebody knows something, but having them actually do something in the real world. So any thoughts about, well, so what does that mean? Does that mean then you've got to recognize a whole bunch of previous life experience when you start to do these types of more open credentials? Or what do you, any one of you can take that one, but what is that the pushback against credentials? What is that alternative in recognizing human experience, and especially experience in the context of specific kinds of real world problems to solve?
I think that I don't think that we're going to sort of eliminate the notion of credentials, particularly in that sort of entry level phase, right? I mean, you don't have any space to demonstrate any knowledge other than I have this type of credential that says some basic elements of what I know. I do think as we expand this work, as you've been out in the workforce for longer periods of time, obviously experience comes into play, and that's where the moment where you can evaluate that experience. But I don't think we're going to move away from any aspect of credentialing, because I just don't think employers will have a way. I agree with Jamie on this. They'll have a way to evaluate what you bring to the table. What the credential does, along with the right experience, is it can help the employer sort of suss out whether you're the right person for this particular role. And I think that's where employers are really trying to do a better job of that evaluative process. No one wants to not have the right hire, right? So I would, I love my OBs, but we like to disagree with each other. And so on this one, I would say that, I don't think that we are gone from the world of credentials. I think at a place like Oberlin, what we're thinking about is all the different ways we can provide different types of credentials, right? That we don't have to be only focused on what it means to have a 4-year BA, right? What does it mean to have 1-year certificate programs? What does it mean to have, workshops and different types of credentials that are provided in that way? What does it mean to leverage our conservatory in a different way, right? That people are thinking about the practicing arts in a holistic way. I think we're thinking about different types of credentials, not the elimination of credentials altogether.
So our time is just about done. I want to ask each of you for one final question. So I give you magic, and I'm going to ask Karl first, then Jamie, then Carmen. Magic wand time. One major change. You can just wave your magic wand and you can guarantee that that one particular issue or change is going to happen that's going to create a better future of work and learning for humans throughout around the planet. What is that one change, Karl, in one or two tweets?
A common skills architecture with ontologies and taxonomy.
So, and we're doing a workshop, a roundtable on that specific issue tomorrow, an invitation-only workshop. So people need to email admin@charrette.us if they want to attend. Jamie, what is your one issue?
Every new dollar that government allocates for post-high school learning is aimed at improving equity and equitable outcomes.
Sold. I love that magic. Carmen, what's your magic?
You know, it's the magic that we've been talking about from the beginning here, that we don't forget the power of the free-flowing collaborative nature of ideas that improve innovation and creativity. If the human being brings anything to the table, it is that we are the problem solvers and creators and innovators. And so how can we ensure that that framework still exists? We have to find a way for the platforms, the technology, and the work that we do still allows us the free-flowing opportunity for the exchange of creative ideas in a collaborative way that helps us solve for the problems and the complexity. And I just don't want us to forget that as we do all these things that we know we need to do. I don't want to forget the uniqueness that the human spirit brings to this work.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a great note to end on. So listen, this has been marvelous for me. I could have gone on for hours, but thanks to each of you for your insights and your energy. It's a tremendous vision of the things that we need to do. And then you've given me the sense that these are possible. So thanks to each of you.
Yep.
Be
Thanks,
well.
Gary.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Good seeing you.
Take care.
So we're just about to wrap up now. I'm going to say goodbye to my guests and then invite our track chairs that join me and do just a brief sort of wrap up for the day. And so I'd love to have Enrique and Arnobio hop in with me. Lindsay is probably a metaphor, but she's over deep water right now. She's on a boat someplace, so she's not going to have the connectivity for us. But you know, each of you guys, you helped to shape the content in your tracks. So many different perspectives, so many different issues and threads. Maybe Enrique, I'll start with you, but just, you know, because you have such a range of different perspectives, so many people from the enterprise. What are 2 or 3 major takeaways that you've taken from so many of the different perspectives? Again, we've had 125 speakers, 26 countries, 4 different tracks. What have been some of the red threads that you've seen throughout the day?
Yeah, I think to me there were a couple of things that sort of came up as critical, for the conversations going forward. One of them is what we already know about the role of technology in accelerating a number of things, in humanity and in the workplace, and that's important because as technology creates a number of challenges for human jobs. At the same time, if we do the right thing, we can leverage on technology to get those humans ready for the new jobs that will be created, or for themselves to create those new jobs. So I think that's one thing that sort of came up to me during the conversations. And the second thing is just how I've been saying this for the past few weeks in my podcast and in the things that I do, is how everything is connected to everything else, right? We can't talk about skills in the workplace if we don't talk about the formal system of education in school for younger people, high school, and in the universities, how the workplace takes formal education and more quote unquote informal education into account. So these conversations can't take place just by themselves. We have to, we have to think very holistically here. And if I may add one thing that I don't know if anybody said in any of the sessions, this is not easy. It's not easy to bring all of these stakeholders together, the government, education institutions, the work organizations, nonprofits, all together to say, hey, what we did in the past is not going to work anymore. So we got to invent something new. And that's very complex, to bring all the stakeholders together and align them, not only to the vision, but also about the action plan to, try to do something about it. So that's what, those were the highlights to me.
No, absolutely. And I'd say one of the things that's key to me, Enrique, is in the past, we might have said, oh, if everything's connected, that means it's a wicked problem. We can't solve it. No. The takeaway is, as you say, is we need to get busy.
Yeah,
we need to actually be collaborating more. We no longer can we say, oh, there's only something to solve in the enterprise, and there's only something to solve on the college campus, and there's only something to solve in the community. Those are all interconnected.
Yeah.
And it's the collaborative process, the connective tissue, and the continual adaptation and innovation together that is actually going to solve those problems, and that they are solvable problems.
Yeah. And to be honest, I am of the naive belief that HR can lead the way. I know, there are many stakeholders in this process, and there are many people who may want to lead the way. But to be honest, at the end of the day, I don't care who does it. Just get your hands dirty and start doing something. I mean, just roll up your sleeves and let's get these conversations going without any political polarization, which may happen, by the way, believing in the science, believing in the data, believing that some of these changes that we're seeing take place now will evolve even faster and will have a significant impact in humanity. So let's get stuff done, to not use the other S word.
Well, I give you tremendous credit in having the energy and the belief that HR can make this transition. I'm a little more skeptical, but that doesn't mean I'm any less supportive.
Absolutely. I know. Believe me, I'm skeptical sometimes of myself too, but.
All right. But if it's going to happen in the enterprise, HR must lead the way. So, Arnobio, what have been some of your takeaways? What are some of the red threads that you've seen throughout the day?
So I think there's two big ones that come really strongly to me. One of them has to do with responsibility. Throughout the whole day, we heard about companies taking and entrepreneurs taking very seriously the role they have in their broader community. And in one way I see it is basically startups have grown up. It's not guys and gals in a garage anymore. They're the major economic force of the world. And we saw that throughout the day, people highlighting the entrepreneurship track, how important it is that entrepreneurs look beyond their immediate business and address the impact they have in their broader community. And number two is super closely related to what you two were just talking about, which is do it in community. And I think that in every session, I heard people referring to how important the collaborations they've had were for what they're doing. And one thing that I had been thinking about for some time, and I think we saw it very clearly today, is that this community today are hyper global and hyper local. And it goes everything from 26 countries participating today to we heard from for example, Nick Smooth in Idaho, and talking about a very hyper local community that's very focused on their town and is expanding globally, but it started very focused there. We heard about Brian, who had one of the biggest tech exits in Brazil ever, talking about a breakfast club of 3 to 4 founders and how important that was for him. So I think this sort of really fascinating spectrum of hyper local and hyper global is a key takeaway for me on how we do community and collaborate moving forward.
No, I think that's brilliant. So, and I think I'm in the position of both trying to synthesize some of the things that came out of the learning track and as well as out of the future of work track. And so, I'm just going to channel some of the things that Lindsay helped catalyze. And I want to offer sort of 4 points that to me are sort of key takeaways. The first one is, and especially just from our most recent discussion, educators are starting to shift and seem to be indicating more and more that they're willing to change. There are challenges to the business model, especially of colleges, but there is this increasing focus on the needs of the learner. And I do hope that the word student eventually sort of evaporates. I just like hope the word employee eventually evaporates. So it's really about learners and workers. It's really about people who think of themselves as being in charge of their own learning, not the student who's the recipient of learning, but the one who is actually the instigator for themselves and for others. And I think more and more we're seeing that mindset shift. Second, organizations, I think, are starting to show that they're willing to invest in human potential. This is something Karl Mehta was talking about from Edcast, but I've seen this throughout, is that a lot of the enterprise decision makers are realizing in the past, we were complaining even just a couple of years ago about how little money was going into trying to train people. And now this is one of the epiphanies that so many leaders in organizations have. Oh, we can train them and we can keep them and we can keep them continually solving the problems of tomorrow. There are some countries around the world like the Nordics and Germany that got that memo a long time ago. But I believe increasingly we've got to have everybody making that commitment that the organization is the place where so much of this investment in human potential has to happen. And that if you pay it forward, you're going to get it back in the workforce that you help to build. Third insight, and I think this plays to your point, Arnobio, communities need to get busy. Communities realize they need to solve their own problems and they have to build the connective tissue to do that. I just happen to be on Nick Smoot's board for Innovation Collective, and I've seen incredible examples of towns around the country and around the world that have just basically said, hey, nobody's coming here to save us. We're going to do this ourselves. We're going to figure out what we need to be good at. We're going to help to catalyze the kinds of learning and the kinds of companies that we need to have. And we're going to actually take our future in our own hands. And then the fourth, and I think the final that I think is just through all the tracks, is I'm seeing a continued focus on systems thinking, ecosystems thinking, partnering, figuring out what the gaps are between what needs to happen so that a learner reaches work, so that an entrepreneur reaches the ability to create a successful company. More and more of this systems thinking and systems partnering is critical, and that anybody is empowered to do that. We've seen some catalyzing initiatives that are started by somebody in college, that are started by somebody who's unemployed, started by somebody who's got a small business and realized nobody else is bringing people together to solve these problems. Let's do it ourselves. And so those are some of the red threads for me, is one of the reasons we call this Global Skills Day is we wanted to show that so much of the capacity that each of us has is to be able to solve such a range of problems. And now what I think we're realizing, I think we're going to look back on this period as this big shift, this pivot point in what I call the Great Reset, where we're going to realize we have the capacity to empower so many humans to solve so many problems. Let's just solve the most important problems. Let's solve the biggest problems, and let's start in our own communities as we do that. So I'm going to ask each of you one last thought. Like, do you have a charge for people going forward, or one last insight that you wanted to offer? And Arnobio, I'm going to put you on the spot first.
Do it in community. Let's do it together.
Done. Yeah. Enrique.
I'm gonna tie back with what I said at the very beginning, which is take action. You know, the time for, I mean, we are all in a journey of learning and, you know, becoming more aware about things that we may not know, but the time to only become aware of things, that time, you know, has already passed. You know, now we have to start moving into action. And the wonderful thing about living in a world where agility is so valued is that as you become aware, you can put stuff into practice. And then you will find out that some things do not work, and you will become even more aware because now you are aware of what was, aware of what doesn't work, and now you're going to try to do it in a different way. But to me, it is all about making stuff happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, great insights, guys. Thank you so much for your efforts to put all this together. I want to thank all of our speakers today. I want to thank all the attendees. I want to thank our producer, Heidi Kleinmaus, who's done an amazing job in herding all the cats for this. I want to thank the production crew. You guys have done, Enrique and Karl, you guys have done an amazing job. And I want to thank all of you for your attention, but also I want to encourage you to do exactly as Enrique and Arnobio said, is to take action yourselves, to start with your own communities and the people that you care about. But to see this as an opportunity to be able to move forward and to see these problems as not intractable, not wicked problems, but problems that we can all solve, and we can do it together. And as I've said before, that we call this Global Skills Day in one day, but we do have a workshop day tomorrow. There's 3 workshops. We're going to close enrollment for those workshops in just a few minutes. So if you check out GSD21.com, if you see a workshop you want to join, you've got to do that right now. And then I'm looking forward to hosting our roundtable tomorrow morning that's going to focus on exactly the issue that Karl was talking about, is building this connective tissue for human skills. So thanks to everybody involved in the event. I want to wish you the best. I want to wish you wellness for you and your family, and go take some action.
Thank you.
And Gary, goodbye.